Imagine the scene. It's a long, hot afternoon on what has been a long, hot summer holiday. And two 5-year-old girls, looking not unlike these, went for a walk in their neighbour's quite shady back garden. Now, we lived in Leicester, and our neighbour had about half an acre. They were millers, and Mrs. Moon and Mr. Moon generously said that the children of the neighbourhood could come and share their garden whenever they needed to. There was no one else to play football or rounders on the great big lawn in front of the house, so we popped round the back, where we didn't normally go. And in amongst the dappled shade, we spotted a pond with stepping stones. And a pond with stepping stones were close enough together that our little 5-year-old legs would probably be able to skip easily between the stepping stones without any trouble. Well, me and my twin sister Emma started at different sides of the pond. Well, you can't stand next to someone else on a stepping stone, so the logical thing to do is to start from opposite sides. Well, it was highly logical until we met in the middle. And my plan was to get to the other side. And her plan was to get to the other side by continuing in the direction we'd started. Now, the problem was our plans did not take into account meeting in the middle. We were only 5, and our 5-year-old little plans didn't really have flexibility for change. We hadn't really thought it through. Now, what we could have done is we could have carefully shuffled around one another and continued on our way. We could have decided that carefully shuffling around was too risky and turned around, gone back the other way. But that would have been to admit defeat. So I think we tried the shuffling, and I don't really remember what happened next, except I do remember sitting in the kitchen at Mrs. Moon's house with Mrs. Moon on the telephone to my mother, Mrs. Westwood, asking Mrs. Westwood to come and collect her rather wet and bedraggled and duckweedy girls. We'd fallen slop, plop, blap, splat, bang into the pond. Now, it wasn't very deep, probably knee-high, maybe thigh-high to 5-year-old little legs. And we didn't live that far away, but Mrs. Moon was not going to be responsible for walking us down the road. And I remember getting home and my mother plopped us unceremoniously into the bath and really tried to explain that if you're going to have a plan, you need to have a plan that works for what actually happens. She probably didn't put it in those terms, but she probably asked us what on earth we were doing, thinking that we could cross the pond stepping stones at the same time and meet clearly in the middle without falling in the pond. Now, that's an example of a plan that's just not very well thought through. Now, there was a military general that said almost every plan survives until it meets the opposition. And quite a lot of our plans don't make real world sense. They don't take into account everything that's going to happen, or they don't anticipate what might happen. And we know that in 2020, when the pandemic hit, a lot of people struggled to look through their contracts to find what it said about force majeure pandemics, only to find nothing, because nobody had thought about it. But we need contracts that are flexible. Unless you're just going in to buy a cup of coffee, most contracts last a period of time, maybe months, maybe years, maybe decades. We need contracts that take into account the kind of things that might happen in that time. I'm not the little girl with 5-year-old legs that I was then. And the plans that I made when I was 5, well, let's say most of them didn't quite happen the way I anticipated. Well, contracts need to have that flexibility too. Contracts need to allow things to change, to allow you to come together and go, oh, hang on, we kind of got stuck in the middle. We can't go that way. We can't get past each other. What are we going to do? Now, the obvious thing might be to turn around and go back, but it could be there are other ways that you could have resolved your impasse. And at the moment, there's lots of things happening in the wider world that we can't really control. We've got geopolitical change. We've got Brexit, we've got administration charges, we've got materials prices increasing, we've got lockdowns, we've got amber lists, we've got travel restrictions, we've got isolation and testing, in fact, all sorts of things that we can't control. And why do we expect our contracts to control them too? We need, instead of to try and control everything, to put in a mature, sensible process for getting to the middle and agreeing how you're going to get out of that situation in a way that suits both of you, in a way you can both agree, yes, actually the sensible thing to do at this point is to quietly turn around and go back the other way. Because sometimes the projects that we wanted to happen simply aren't going to be needed anymore, can't happen the way we wanted to. That things have intervened which make our plans, well, not as relevant as they used to be. So your contracts need to increase and improve and allow for flexibility rather than to be cast in stone in the hope that 2,000 years from now, people will be able to read it, understand it, and be able to use it. So your contracts can safeguard your business without annoying everyone when it turns out that things have changed. How are you going to adopt change processes in your contracts so that you can meet your clients' needs whilst reflecting the turbulent times we're living in?